Happy Friday! So, we have read chapters 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 this week. That is super awesome, y'all. We've done a whole lot of work. I'm super duper proud of you guys. So we are going to read those little in-between sections that y'all remember from last Friday. I know that y'all are like, there's 5 chapters to go through, but y'all know that these are only like 1 page long. So here's that. And there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's only 7 questions for all of them together. So that's really not a whole lot. It's only 1 or 2 questions per little page thing in between section. Okay, so we are going to start off with the section on warfare. So it's kind of like how people fight. It's the first section of questions on y'all's Google Doc that you can answer after this. If it were me, I would listen to me read it. I'm obviously going to say the questions, then listen to me read it, each of the things, and then go back and answer them. Even if you have to go back and rewatch parts so that you can get the answers. I promise these are super easy. Like I said, they're super short. Super short is what I just said. Okay, so warfare. Number 1, the first question on the section about warfare says, what is the rolling valley? And number 2, what did American soldiers do when they encountered it? So, those are the questions to be listening for as I read this section on warfare. So, warfare. The British procedure when fighting was to march at the foe in a close line. So the foe is like the enemy. In a close line with 2 or 3 ranks of men. The front rank would fire at 50 or 60 yards, then drop back and reload while the second rank stepped forward and fired, dropping back and reloading while the back rank came forward and fired. This rolling valley had the effects of creating a kind of mass firepower. The weapons were very simple, but it was almost impossible to stand against the line when the men grew close, quit firing altogether, and charged, screaming at their enemies. It took a special kind of courage to stand ready when a line of howling men ran at you with bayonets aimed at your stomach. Many times American soldiers turned and ran the other way rather than to face the British army called the Wall of British Steel. So, that is a lot of information packed into a short little 2 paragraphs. So the questions for that, again, for this section on warfare, it says, number 1, what is the rolling valley? So I would just go through and explain the ranks. Even if you need to turn the captions on, hopefully they're correct. Or just listen and explain those 3 different ranks. And then what did the American soldiers do when they encountered it? That was at the very end of what I just read. So we are going to move on. The next in-between section is wounds. Obviously, a wound is like an injury. It says wounds. The question for that one, there's only 1 question. It says, how did they teach... Words are fun. How did they treat gangrene? So that word is gangrene. So we will read about it in the book. This is super short. So be sure you are listening and for that question on how do they treat gangrene, so you can answer it after we get done. And again, it's totally fine if you need to come back to this point in the video when you're answering the questions so that you can get that information again. Okay, wounds. Untreated battle injuries often led to gangrene, which causes the body to literally rot away, first turning green, then black from infection that travels rapidly. Because antibiotics were unavailable in the 18th century, amputation was usually the treatment. Due to the horrific odor of gangrene, surgeons could smell the patient and make an accurate diagnosis. If the patient was not lucky enough to benefit from amputations, maggots or small bugs would be introduced into the wound in an attempt to aid the healing. They would eat away the infection. Barring the surgical removal of body parts or the use of parasites, doing absolutely nothing and letting the patient die was the only option at the time. Ew. That was just kind of how things went back then. So some of y'all that are kind of like, ew, there are parts in this book that are a little bit spooky and are a little bit gross, and we're kind of unfamiliar with it. But it's just kind of how things went back in the day before they had, modern medicine. And it's just, war was different. Medicine was different. So they had to do things a little bit differently. So it's not gross or bad. It's just how things had to be. So the next section is on American spirit. American spirit. There's only one question for this. It says, why did American soldiers have higher morale than the British? So morale is like, we have good morale in my classroom at Meadow Park because like we're really happy with each other. We're in a good mood. A bad morale would be like if everyone was grumpy all the time. So morale kind of means like how they interact with each other, and if it's happy, then it's a higher morale, and if it's not, then it's a lower morale. So again, y'all, the sections are just getting smaller. So be sure that you're really listening so that you can get the answer for this, so you can answer it once we get done. Okay, American spirit. Although my neighbors are talking outside, so sorry. Although poorly trained and weakly led, that means they didn't have good leaders, and improperly fed so badly that soldiers sometimes had to eat their shoes, the Americans took comfort from fighting on home soil and usually had much higher morale than the British. While they were often outnumbered and fought with inferior equipment, this spirit had an enormous effect, and they took the phrase, morale is to fighting as 4 is to 1, to heart on the battlefields. So, again, the question says, why did American soldiers have higher morale than the British? See, we're over halfway done already. I don't know if y'all can hear Maverick barking in the background. I'm obviously not a professional video taker. Okay, this section is on the Hessians, which we've obviously discussed this week. There are 2 questions about this one. The first one just says, who were the Hessians? Which, if you were listening really carefully in the past 2 days worth of reading, or maybe 1 day worth of reading, I'm not sure when it got brought up actually, you would have heard me say who the Hessians were already, but we're going to read this again, very short little section on them. So it says, number 1, who were the Hessians? And number 2, how were they different from combat soldiers? How were they different from combat soldiers? So, the section on the Hessians. The British also used mercenary soldiers issued with the same brown Bess musket and bayonet. Most of them were troops from Germany called Hessians. While they were relatively effective as combat soldiers, they brought with them such savage, atrocious behavior and committed war crimes so far outside civilized behavior, bayoneting unarmed captive soldiers who had surrendered, farmers, women, including pregnant women, children, and even infants, that they became known as little more than beasts and were treated in kind. So to summarize that, they were basically like really, really, really mean people who it says that they were relatively effective as combat soldiers, but they had such bad behavior. It says atrocious behavior, and they committed awful, awful war crimes that were so uncivilized, like we've discussed, like killing people's friends and family. I mean, it was just awful, like burning down all the houses. They just didn't act like humans should act. They were killing people. It says killing even unarmed soldiers who had surrendered. Like, they were like, hands up. They still would kill them, farmers, women, children, everybody. So, They were obviously not great people. So be sure you answer those 2 questions on the Hessians. Last section we are doing, see, this has gone by in no time. This is so much shorter than most of the videos we've watched this week. So y'all are great. So this section is on war orphans. So remember, an orphan is someone who has lost both of their parents. So war orphans. And the question on the document that y'all have to fill out says, what happened to many of the children after the war? What happened to many of the children after the war? So, excuse me, it's Friday. Okay, war orphans. Children orphaned by war, as countless were during the Revolutionary War, suffer from nightmares and sleeping problems, headaches, stomach aches, anger, irritability, and anxiety. Several traumatized children may become withdrawn, appear numb and unresponsive, and sometimes become mute. When the danger and devastation end, children can show remarkable resilience and recover if they are in a safe and stable environment where they are cared for and nurtured. After the Revolutionary War, however, many orphans, if they were not taken in by other families, grew up in institutions. Formal adoptions were very rare. So institutions means like either like a kind of like a psych ward, like they had to go because they thought that they were like mentally ill when they weren't really mentally ill. It says that they sometimes were numb and withdrawn and unresponsive, or sometimes even mute, which means they didn't talk at all. So they thought that there was something like wrong with them when there wasn't anything wrong with them. They were just really traumatized by everything that had happened to them. So it says formal adoptions were very rare. So they rarely got adopted by another family, which is super, super sad. Kind of makes you really grateful that we're growing up in these times, even though it's really hard because obviously there's a pandemic and we're stuck in the house. It could be a lot worse. So we should be really thankful for everything that we do have during this time, even if you feel like, oh, I just wish that I could go outside and play, or I wish that I could see my friends. I promise we are all feeling it a little bit, especially at this point in the quarantine. So I miss you guys and I love you guys, and let's all try and keep a positive mindset. Remember, you can push through anything you put your mind to, and you are smart and you are capable, and I believe in you and you should believe in you too. So as always, if you need me, I'm on my phone call away, and I will see you guys next week for chapter 12 and the rest of the chapters, obviously. Okay, have a great weekend. Bye.